Good afternoon. Today, in a combined effort by federal, state, and local law enforcement in California, Minnesota, and Maryland, more than 50 alleged members of the dangerous Sinaloa cartel were arrested as part of an international narcotics trafficking and money laundering investigation called Operation Xcellerator. The 21-month investigation, coordinated by the Special Operations Division here at the Justice Department and led by the United States Drug Enforcement Administration, combined numerous individual investigations in the United States, Mexico, and Canada with a common focus on the drug trafficking activities of one of the largest Mexican drug cartels. During the last 21 months of the operation, more than 750 people have been arrested in the United States and also in Mexico. More than $59 million in illegal drug proceeds and large amounts of narcotics and weapons have been seized in the United States by law enforcement authorities, including more than 12,000 kilos of cocaine, 1,200 pounds of methamphetamine, 1.3 million ecstasy pills, and more than 160 weapons. Now, these are enormous amounts of narcotics, drugs otherwise destined for the streets of the United States. The Sinaloa cartel has operated a wide-ranging criminal endeavor in the United States and also in Mexico. The indictments unsealed today allege that they distributed these dangerous narcotics into our communities, profited from their sale, and laundered the illegal proceeds. The indictments allege that cartel members contracted the transportation of narcotics to the United States and then distributed them through an extensive web of cells in places like California, Minnesota, Maryland, and here in the District of Columbia. Including today's arrests and indictments, this investigation has led to federal narcotics prosecutions across the country, and I want to commend those involved in coordinating and orchestrating this operation for their extraordinary efforts. An operation of this scope and magnitude can only be effective when the resources and expertise of federal, state, and local authorities are marshaled to combat a common enemy. Now, it is no secret that we are now seeing many more international aspects to cases that were once only domestic ones. As our world grows smaller, the ability of criminals from outside the United States to operate within our borders grows larger. In the face of internationalized crime, there are no more important partners than our law enforcement counterparts abroad, and I particularly want to thank our counterparts in Mexico for their important support in this operation. I met yesterday with Attorney General Medina Mora of Mexico, and we discussed the unprecedented levels of violence his country is facing because of their enforcement efforts. The Mexican government has been courageous during the last 2 years to directly confront the drug trafficking cartels, and I stand before you today to say that we are ready and willing to continue the fight with our Mexican counterparts against these violent enterprises. El gobierno de México ha sido muy valiente en los últimos 2 años en hacer frente directamente a los carteles de drogas. Y estoy ante ustedes para decir que estamos listos y comprometidos para continuar la lucha contra estos criminales violentos junto con nuestros colegas mexicanos. International drug trafficking organizations pose a sustained, serious threat to international safety and security. They are a national security threat. They bear the hallmarks of organized crime, married to savvy business practices that allow for successful international commerce. They are lucrative, they are violent, and they are operated with stunning planning and precision. The sad reality of what happens when these cartels are allowed to infiltrate our communities can be seen in every big city and small town in the United States of America. Operation Xcellerator proves yet again that these cartels are not just operating in Mexico, their reach stretches far and wide. So despite the successes I am announcing today, we simply cannot afford to let down our guard. The Department of Justice, under my leadership, will continue to work with our counterparts in Mexico through information gathering, training, and mutual cooperation to jointly fight these cartels both in Mexico and in the United States. We can provide our communities the safety and the security that they deserve only by confronting these dangerous cartels head-on, without reservation. We can do that, and we will do that. These cartels will be destroyed. I would now like to turn the microphone over to DEA Acting Administrator Michele Leonhart to give you more details on the operation that we are announcing today. Michele?
Thank you, Attorney General Holder. Today we have dealt the Sinaloa drug cartel a crushing blow in one of the largest joint international law enforcement efforts ever undertaken. As a result of this operation, they've been hit hard, and their ability to spread death and destruction has been diminished. We are here today to tell you what we're doing to stop them. The Sinaloa cartel is a Mexican-based drug organization that dominates much of the drug smuggling on the southwest border. The cartel, which is also known as the Federation, was founded some 35 years ago and has evolved into one of the largest organized crime syndicates in the world. Due to their ruthless desire to expand and the successful efforts of law enforcement to curtail them, the Sinaloa cartel has violently lashed out and is responsible for much of the upsurge in violence taking place today in Mexico. Operation xCellerator began in Imperial County, California, 21 months ago. As a result of investigations that followed, we have connected the dots to 70 distribution cells of the Sinaloa cartel in communities in 26 states that range from Washington State to Maine. DEA and our partners took down the cartel's operatives in big cities like New York and Baltimore and Los Angeles, but also in the small towns like Brockton, Massachusetts, and Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Stowe, Ohio. For example, consider the case of Stowe in northeastern Ohio. This is a suburban community of 35,000 known for its small businesses, good schools, and universities. It became a conduit for criminals running cocaine. Just underneath the surface of this peaceful city, the Sinaloa cartel had been sending cocaine through this community's local airport, ferrying dozens of kilos of cocaine from California to Stowe on a regular basis. And this cocaine ended up not just on the streets of larger cities like Cleveland and Columbus, but also in surrounding small towns and onto the campuses of the schools in the region. The spread of the Sinaloa cartel is a direct threat to the safety and security of law-abiding citizens everywhere, and the money generated from their sales of illegal drugs are used to fund other criminal activities, extending their violent enterprises further into our heartland. So consider that the cartels that are making life unbearable in border towns in Mexico are contributing to trafficker violence in the United States. As a part of Operation xCellerator, we seized more than 150 weapons. These weapons would have stayed in the community or been shipped across the border. In places like San Diego, our investigations led to the arrest of violent career criminals with ties to the Sinaloa cartel. And just 40 miles from here in Baltimore, we took down violent drug traffickers which were supplied with hundreds of kilos of cocaine from Mexico. We've seen clearly through this operation the added value we bring in the broader fight against gangs and gang violence across our country. During this operation, we also saw the extent and the scope of the Sinaloa cartel's international network, including multi-hundred kilo cocaine shipments to traffickers in Canada, a super meth lab that is so sophisticated we've seen none like it anywhere, and presses capable of producing 12,000 ecstasy pills an hour. Operation xCellerator stunted and in many cases shut down their networks in the United States, Canada, and Mexico, and led to the arrest of traffickers with ties to countries around the world. The reach of their networks meant we needed to enhance our local and global collaboration, and we have. Operation xCellerator is an example of the extraordinary level of cooperation now taking place between law enforcement agencies in the United States and with our international partners. And DEA is working with our colleagues, our courageous colleagues in Mexico, like never before to hit the cartel hard. We know the impact of our enforcement is being felt. Since beginning of 2007, cocaine prices have more than doubled, while purity has dropped by more than a third. And with this operation, we've denied the Sinaloa cartel and its networks nearly $1 billion in drug revenue. And we've arrested over 750 drug traffickers as a part of Operation Accelerator. We are committed to defeating those that thrive on the suffering of others, and we are determined to take away from them not just their drugs, but their money and their freedom. DEA will continue attacking the international drug trade with every tool at our disposal, fighting to defeat those who put deadly drugs on our streets and engage in violence in our communities. So rest assured that while this is DEA's biggest operation against the Sinaloa cartel and their networks, it will not be the last. Thank you very much.
General Holder, how concerned are you about the threat of Mexican cartels and about the possibility that the violence could spread much more directly into the United States?
I mean, I think that has to be a concern. We are two nations bound not only by a border, but by a common history. And the problems that Mexico faces are also problems that we face. We would be naive to think that we can restrict the concerns that the Mexicans have to only Mexico, that the violence will only be there. The border towns that confront, that are a part of the Mexican border, are places that I think deserve special attention. But I think what I want to emphasize is that the dimensions of what we are breaking up today had nationwide implications, that is, nationwide in the United States. When we talk about an operation that was centered in Mexico and yet having an impact here in the District of Columbia, will give you a sense of the breadth of that operation and why the announcement we think is such an important one.
Yes, General, following on that, what will the trade look like tomorrow after this operation in the United States? You know, will street supplies dry up? Will the cartel have people ready to move up?
I'd like to answer that, but let Michelle answer that as well. I mean, it's clear that with this operation, as successful as it is, as large as it is, the problem that we faced is one that will continue. It doesn't in any way, however, decrease the importance of what we are announcing today. This is an ongoing effort, and I think one of the things that is most important to me is that we had cooperation at all levels, both within law enforcement here in the United States and with our Mexican counterparts. And I think the combination of those teams, of those components, will ultimately make us successful in the fight against this cartel and others as well.
I think you can look at the impact since the operation started, which was in May of 2007, and you heard me say that over the last 24 months there's been a change in the price and purity of cocaine. That is one of the impacts that we see as a result of this serious attack, not only by law enforcement in the United States, but law enforcement also in Mexico, our true partners. Serious pressure put on these cartels, and the result is a shrinking market. The result is less cocaine on the streets of the United States. That's why the price has been affected. That's why the purity has been affected. And I go back to stripping $1 billion of drug revenue from this cartel is going to hurt.
And maybe Michelle share purity and shared before.
Sure. It is in the 35-year history of DEA, we have not seen in that 24-month period of time the impact that we're seeing now, and it's directly related to our operations here in the United States, our operations in Mexico and Colombia and the transit zone. The price of cocaine in 24 months has increased 104%, while the purity has decreased 34.8%. And we not only saw a increase in cocaine during that period of time, we also saw the price of methamphetamine rise as well. So that is an impact on the market.
General Holder, as the Mexican authorities have put pressure on the cartels, the violence there has exploded. Some 5,000 people killed last year, already 1,000 I think this year. Are you concerned that putting pressure on the domestic market here in the U.S. will make that violence worse, or what do you see as the effect of this roundup on the violence there?
Well, I think there is an unfortunate consequence of the courageous stand that our Mexican counterparts have taken. As you've indicated, there have been a number of deaths. Thousands of people have given their lives, many of whom served in law enforcement, many of whom were innocent bystanders. And yet, this is a war that this Mexican administration has declared, and the determination that they have shown in the face of that violence, I think, is to be commended. Are there going to be additional casualties? I suspect that is true. But ultimately, working their way through those casualty figures and with the determination that they have, and with our assistance, I think they will be successful.
But by drying up the domestic market to the degree that you are, do you think that could add to the violence problem in Mexico in the short term?
I'm not sure about that. I mean, I want to think about this in the long term, and by putting these people out of business, these cartels out of business, we will ultimately restore peace to Mexico, to the border areas that surround or that encompass the United States, and make the quality of life for many of our citizens in this country better as well.
Mr. Attorney General, two questions actually. Do you have a sense of whether most of these people who were arrested were U.S. citizens, or were they in the country illegally? And also had a question about your visit to Guantanamo Bay. Was there anything that you saw there that you didn't know that you think has informed you during the review process?
Well, I'll let Michele answer the first question, since she did not go with me to Guantanamo. I thought the visit to Guantanamo was actually pretty instructive. We got a chance to see all the different camps down there. I was impressed by the people who are presently running the camp. I think Admiral Thomas is doing a superb job. I think the facilities there are good ones. There's obviously a report that has been issued that I have examined as well. But I think it does not in any way decrease our determination to close the facility, even though, as I said, I think it is being well run now. Our determination to close it, I think, is rooted in the things that the President spoke about when he signed the executive order, and consistent with my testimony during my confirmation hearing.
As far as the traffickers that are arrested in this case, there's a combination. We arrested not only U.S. citizens, but citizens of Mexico, citizens of Canada, Thailand, a number of other countries. The arrests in the United States, a hodgepodge, many legally here, and some not legally here. The importance is looking at the higher echelon of that cartel, and you need to know that the higher echelon is on the run, and they're all in Mexico right now. One was killed recently on a clash with the Mexican military, but the rest are Mexican citizens who are fugitives in Mexico.
General Holder, the Attorney General from Mexico, I understand, expressed their concerns about the increasing number of weapons, heavy weapons that can transverse armored vehicles. Have you offered some sort of help to prevent that these weapons go to the Mexican cartels and continue this war against the Mexican army?
In our conversations yesterday and in a phone conversation I had with the Attorney General, I guess in the week before, that was a concern that he raised about the number of illegal weapons that are finding their way to Mexico. Not only the number, but the the caliber, the size of the weapons that you see in Mexico. ATF is doing all that it can to ensure that we stanch the flow of those weapons to Mexico. As good partners, I think that is one of the things that we have to do. If Mexican authorities, Mexican law enforcement personnel are going to put their lives on the line, we in the United States, it seems to me, have a responsibility to make sure that they are not fighting substantial numbers of weapons or fighting against AK-47s or other similar kinds of weapons that have been flowing to Mexico. And it was also one of the reasons why, and you'll forgive me for the Spanish that I used, to try to express to our friends, our colleagues in Mexico, in their language, our determination to stand with them in this courageous fight that President Calderon and the Attorney General have started.
Follow up on that one. I understand Mexico is interested in the U.S. reviewing the enforcement of its assault weapons regulations. Are you doing something about that?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand.
The enforcement of the assault weapons regulations in the U.S., are you reviewing that? As Mexico, I think, understands wants it?
Well, as President Obama indicated during the campaign, there are just a few gun-related changes that we would like to make, and among them would be to reinstitute the ban on the sale of assault weapons. I think that will have a positive impact in Mexico, at a minimum.
General, can you talk a little bit about Maryland today? You took down some, made some arrests in Maryland, Minnesota, and California, I think you said. Can you talk about the significance of Maryland? How busy was this cartel in Maryland? I understand you made some hit some houses in Prince George's County today.
Sure. The operation in Maryland was actually Mexican traffickers in California who were surrogates of the Sinaloa cartel and got their cocaine from the Sinaloa cartel and would ship it out to the Maryland area, Washington, D.C. area. And we found that along the Beltway in Maryland there were pockets of groups, cocaine distributors, who received their cocaine from these Mexican traffickers. And when we looked at the Maryland traffickers, we found that many of them were career criminals. According to the Baltimore Police Department, some of them have been wanted for homicides, robberies. So they're violent criminals that were taken down in this operation today, and a series of operations over the last 21 months.
Ms. Leonhart, can I ask you a question about Ecuador? You know that the Ecuadorian government has recently expelled 2 members of DEA based in Quito, and they accuse DEA of spying and doing illicit activities in that country. What is your reaction to that?
I'm not sure I heard the beginning, but you're talking about Quito, Ecuador? I am aware that there are some U.S. Officials who've been expelled. They're not DEA.
How worried are you about corruption in Mexico? Whether that's...
May I ask you again about, you said that it might have a positive effect on the situation in Mexico to reinstitute the assault weapons ban. Do you have any kind of timetable for that? Is that something you'd like this Congress to do this year?
Well, it's something, as I said, that the President talked about during the campaign. There are obviously a number of things that have been taking up a substantial amount of his time. And so I'm not sure exactly what the sequencing will be. It is something, however, that we still think would be an appropriate thing to do. So I cut you off.
I'm just wondering, there's been some published reports recently about how some of the Mexican officials have been linked to the Sinaloa cartel, and I'm wondering how concerned you are about corruption on that side of the border, and also maybe on this side of the border with some local law enforcement officials, and what can be done about that.
Well, one of the things that I said to the Attorney General yesterday is that corruption is a problem, especially given the amounts of money that the cartels, the drug traffickers have to throw at people on both sides of the border. And what I made clear to the Attorney General is that from our perspective, I will simply not tolerate corruption at any level by any law enforcement official in the United States. My background is as a public corruption prosecutor, and I will make sure that our government holds to the fullest extent possible anybody responsible for accepting bribes or taking anything, taking any monies from the cartels. Now, there is a problem, obviously, on the Mexican side of the border as well. It is one that the Attorney General is cognizant of, and they are working to get through that problem with the use of vetted units and coming up with other ways in which they can combat that problem. It is a problem that both sides have to deal with, but one in which I think we will both ultimately be successful. I don't know, Michele, if you wanted to say something.
On Guantanamo, did you see anything when you were down there to substantiate accusations that some of the guards were sort of getting in their last licks after the inauguration and stepping up abuses of prisoners? And then a second thing on drugs policy. Right after the inauguration, there were some raids on California medical marijuana dispensaries. Was that a deliberate decision by you, by the Justice Department, it's a prediction of policy going forward. You expect those sorts of raids to continue?
No.
Despite what the President said during the campaign.
Well, what the President said during the campaign, you'll be surprised to know, will be consistent with what we will be doing here in law enforcement. He was my boss during the campaign. He is formally and technically and by law my boss now. And so what he said during the campaign is now American policy. I'm sure I don't remember what the first question was.
Guantanamo.
Yes. I did not witness anything in when I was at Guantanamo that indicated people were getting in, I think as you put it, last licks. I did not witness any mistreatment of prisoners. I think to the contrary, what I saw was a very conscious attempt to conduct these guards to conduct themselves in an appropriate way.
Also on Guantanamo, last week you announced a structure, a decision-making process for deciding what to do with all of the detainees. And I'm not sure you've told us anything today about whether anything that you saw, the briefings, the tour, anything, excuse me, gives you a better sense of how that decision-making process will go and where this is going to shake out.
I mean, I think it's going to be an involved process. We have, we have a year, a little less than a year, I guess, at this point to try to work our way through that. I think it's going to take us a good portion of that time to look at all of the files that we have to examine and to really get our hands around what Guantanamo is and also what Guantanamo was. This will not be an easy process. It's one that we will do in a way that ensures that people are treated fairly and that the American people are kept safe.
Thank you. Ms. Leonhart.
Thanks very much.